After not having played Minecraft for several months, I started watching Minecraft videos on YouTube to see what had been added to the game, and I came across Sethblink's channel. I highly recommend this channel to any Minecraft players who are trying to see what can be done, because he basically just builds interesting and functional things in Minecraft that show off the physics. In response to a comment I left in one of his videos, he informed me that the minecart booster glitch no longer worked, and that had been a huge part of the early physics of Minecraft. So I decided to start playing again and see what I could figure out. Something I wanted to build, it looked like, would require a clock that was much faster than any I had seen previously, and so I set about designing one, and that's what I'm going to show off today. So to start, you're going to want a 4x4 base with a conducting block at each corner, and then to add pistons in a pinwheel fashion like this, and complete the rest of the perimeter with redstone. So for future reference, I'm going to refer to this as the pinwheel base. If you search on YouTube for piston clock, you'll see a bunch of clocks that are similar to this, with those bottom dug out and 4 torches placed like that. But the difference is that they'll have a repeater coming off here, and then redstone, 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 rather than redstone and redstone on top of a conducting block. And the design is supposed to be that when you place a block in front of this piston, it'll be powered by the torch below it, which in turn will power the repeater, powering the redstone and the piston, pushing the block off of the torch and into the next section. And then once that happens, the powering gets disconnected and the piston retracts again. By removing the repeater, I've just made this faster. So you can see that works fine, but there is a problem with it, which I'll illustrate over here. So this is constructed in exactly the same way as that last clock, but we see that this gets jammed in this corner for some reason. What's happening is, normally the redstone wants to orient towards the torch, but as soon as the block gets put in above the torch, it wants to cut that connection, and then the redstone will reorient away from the block. But also it'll be powered by the block. So there's two things that are happening in that instant. It wants to reorient away from the block and towards the piston, and it also wants to be powered. And then after that, a second thing happens. Either this piston can be powered, or this piston can, if the redstone does reorient. So that leaves a possibility of both the redstone reorienting and powering this piston first. In order to prevent that from happening, just putting a piece of redstone on the outside forces the redstone only ever orient as a T shape like this, or as an L. Same thing happens over here, and now we fix the clock. So notice though that this does require extra space. So just once more to show over here. Right, so this clock actually doesn't require any extra pieces of redstone on the outside, but there's an additional requirement of some of its clocks, and that can be shown off over here. So even though this clock looks like it doesn't need extra redstone on the outside, you can test that further by removing the redstone in the corners. So this corner doesn't actually need a piece of redstone to keep running. Neither does this one. But this one, if you remove the redstone, it'll stall. And that means that this piece of redstone actually is powering this piston definitely before this block. And this is a problem because even when you replace this, the clock, if it gets saved to either hard disk or when you save and quit and then reload the level, if it gets saved in this position, it will always power this piston before this one. And so this actually needs an extra piece of redstone right here. Same with this corner. So replace that, still a problem, and now you need that. Alright, so you can see that depending on where these clocks are placed, they behave differently. And it's not like a north or southwest rule, because the clocks have fourfold rotation. They also are all placed in the center of the western edge of their respective chunks. So it's not that. I believe this is the same thing that Sethblink identified of how Minecraft updates stuff depending on how it's placed into a Java hash, and things are placed in a Java hash pseudo-randomly, which means just the position can change how it functions. Like if I remove this whole thing over one block, it might have completely different behavior. Alright, so to use this as a clock, what we want to do is connect all 4 corners out to one side without them interfering with each other, so I can use the signals from them. To do that, I'll use repeaters. Alright, so those two work. Now, there is a problem with this particular clock. Normally, we would want to just bring the signal out like this, but note that it doesn't actually make it out this far. It actually doesn't even want to make it out this far. But that one will work. In order to make this more compact, though, what I'm going to do is this. So, for some reason, this works. Similarly on this side, in order to make this signal get past this without interfering in a compact way, I'm going to use a repeater and then use a block to pull the signal through. Or, sorry, then use a block so the repeater can pull the signal through. Now again, this one happens to not work, but it does work if you put a block and then redstone above that block. Alright, so now we've put all 4 pulses into this one edge. And if we hook it up to a piston, we can see that it reliably causes the piston to extend every pulse. Now it's not completely perfect, but I'll get to that in a minute. Alright, so there were bugs with this, having to do with the orientation of the redstone and the powering fighting each other, and also if you fall in there, you'll get stuck until you start breaking the clock apart, which is annoying. And also it's not that compact. So I figured out a more compact way to build essentially the same thing, using power track. So you know when I put the track in, it caused the redstone to automatically reorient, versus the block which caused it to orient away. So in this case, the power source also causes the redstone that it's powering to reorient away from the piston next to it, which means we'll never have the problem needing extra redstone around the sides. To start the clock then, I just need to put in my minecart, and you'll note that the minecart doesn't actually contact the block after a while, or the piece of track after a while. Now I can just jump in there and try to push the minecart out as it's moving, and it'll take a while, but a quicker way to do that is to simply remove piece of redstone, take out the cart, and then you'll note that this redstone remains powered by that piece of track for quite a while. It can actually remain powered for up to 20 seconds sometimes, but sometimes it's as short as 3 seconds, so you might have to get lucky if you're slow at removing the minecart. But then once you place it back, this piece of track will stay powered as long as it keeps getting pushed, which means it's a power source that can be pushed by a piston and retain its power state forever, which is not something I think anyone else has demonstrated before. Like, I've seen people claim that there are no power sources which can be pushed, and this is one, actually, that can be. So that's something new. To hook this to the front, I'll try to do like I did before. See that that side works. And this side also works, but it turns out that these two front ones don't want to work. So after fussing around with them a while, I found out that the high block thing works again. Oops. So like this, and like this, and then placing repeaters on the high ground will now allow the signals to all be put into one edge. So now I can power a piston with it, power a piston with this one. And we can see that these two are synchronized perfectly. Now, this doesn't actually always have to happen when you start the clocks, but if you want them to be synchronized perfectly, you can just simply quit and reload the level a few times. And they will, after they're synchronized, they'll always be synchronized from that point forward. So I'm going to load a few chunks. So those two work. Now to measure the properties of this clock, since those two are identical, I'll just measure one. I built this over here. What we can see is that these two repeaters, this one and this one, are powered by the same length of redstone. So these two we know are perfectly synchronized. Then this is 1 tick delayed, 2 ticks delayed, 3 ticks delayed, 4 ticks, 5 ticks, 6 ticks. So this now we can see is also synchronized again. What this means is that this clock does exactly 1 cycle for every 6 ticks. But we've already seen that it produces 4 evenly spaced pulses per cycle. What this means is that this is a 1.5 tick clock. Something else I've done over here is I've taken this 1 tick on, 5 tick off clock, and I've spread it into 1, 3, and 5 delays over here, and then 2, 4, and 6 delays over here. What that does is it makes these two outputs here be each 1 tick on, 1 tick off clocks, which are out of phase by 1 tick. And the reason I've done that is to demonstrate that, okay, so this piston can be pushed by one of them at a certain speed, but if we hook up both of them, the piston keeps going at the exact same speed. So what we find is that the piston can't be powered by both. The door kind of can. You can hear, for example, the closing and opening sound playing simultaneously at the beginning of every single tick, but unfortunately you can't walk through the door, so it's not actually moving at all. It's constant in its position, even if the graphics were working properly. This door, on the other hand, actually does open and close for the 1.5 tick, and as we saw, the piston works with it.